All right. So, in the lyrics of one of those songs, something very powerful. And if we understand again that with the death of Yahusha, we go from the bondage of a physical priesthood where physical sacrifices had to be offered and there was physical everything that had to be done, to a spiritual priesthood where we make teshuvah, and the offering that was made by Yahusha covers that. We also consider the idea of the spiritual kingdom. Yahusha, at the beginning of his ministry, the first thing that he says is, repent. And the word that he uses is actually a word that means have the intent to repent. Be prepared to make teshuvah. Have the intent that you're going to do it. Because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Now, we have to understand the Hebraic mind, okay? When they say the kingdom of heaven, what they're referring to specifically is the kingdom of Yahuwah, okay, is at hand. So, let's, we talked about stuff in Romans. But before we do, now we haven't got to the lesson yet, so, because all this stuff comes to you after the fact. If we consider the fact that we're going back to the tablets that contain Shemot, the tablets that contain the building of the tabernacle, we have to consider the thing that is present before the altar. Okay? The altar is where we bring the sacrifice. The thing in front of it is this big, shiny, polished bronze basin where the priest would go and they'd wash themselves before offering up a sacrifice. And in this, we consider that, and we'll talk about it because we're going to take a look at James in just a second, that before we can offer up a sacrifice, we have to be able to look in that basin and recognize that we need to wash ourselves. We need to understand where we are before we can offer up a sacrifice. And this is part of this time of reflection of the Omar. A very important thing. So let's consider some things that Paul had to say in Romans before we get to the lesson. And these are taken, they're out of order, but they're from Romans chapter 6 and chapter 7. You put them together, they make perfect sense. It kind of sums up everything that Paul is saying in a whole bunch of words. That's why it says that he's difficult to understand, because he uses too many words. But Romans 7:25 says, I thank Elohim through Yahusha HaMashiach, our master. So then, with the mind, I myself serve the Torah of Elohim, but the flesh, the law of sin. So, what was this powerful verse then in the song? It says, give us new hearts and new minds. Now, he said, for your glory. It kind of loses meaning because in Hebrew there's really not a word for glory. That's kind of a Greco-Roman idea. Glory is something that we offer up to a deity. We glorify a deity. Okay? The word kavod means esteem. It means to honor. It also means majesty. Okay? The idea of a king in a kingdom. So if we look at that from that point of view, give us new hearts and new minds so that we can honor your majesty. Okay? This period of reflection in the Omer is allowing us to become accustomed to a spiritual kingdom. And we've talked about this dozens of times, that Yahuwah our Elohim is present. In the name itself, in the name and the title, Yahuwah Elohim, if we break that down in the very most basic forms, it means life force. That there is a life force present with us that provides everything that we need at every time that we need it. So we go to verse 23 of chapter 7. But I see another Torah in my members, in my body, warring against the Torah of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the Torah of sin, which is in my members. So we're constantly being pushed back into a Levitical system because we don't recognize where we are, and we don't recognize something very important that Paul's going to bring out in just a second. So hold on to that thought. Verse 16, if then I do that which I would not, I consent to the Torah that is good. So if I do that which I would not, then basically I'm ignoring the Torah. If I do the things that I should not do, I ignore the Torah. But if I do the things that I should do, then I consent to the Torah. Okay? And here's the important one. Verse 14. For we know that the Torah is spiritual, but I am carnal. I'm a slave to that carnal desire. He uses the word sin, but sin is kind of an overrated word. You know, sin is so itty-bitty. We have transgression. We have a lot of transgressions. And we can make teshuvah from the transgression. It doesn't become sin. But if we allow that transgression to continue and to grow, then that transgression becomes sin because our minds basically go reprobate and we don't care. Okay? Then we go on to verse 16 of chapter 6. Do you not know that to whom you hold yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are to whom you obey, whether it's to sin towards death or to obedience towards righteousness? We have a choice as to what we can obey. Okay? And all this takes us to James, where actually, let's take another look at Romans 13 through 16 right quick. It says, for if you live after the flesh, you die. But if you live through the Spirit to mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. So, again, how am I aware of the carnal inclinations? How do I become aware of the Yetzer Hara? How do I become aware of the evil inclinations within my body? Well, if I don't understand that there's a Torah, that there's instructions that tell me, hey, wake up, then I have a problem. For as many as are led by the Spirit of Elohim, they are the sons of Elohim, the children of Elohim. You've not received the spirit of bondage, again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of Elohim, B'nai Yisrael. Okay, that's a very big thing. Not just the idea of being children of Elohim. Well, we were children of atheists or children of Elohim. He created us all. But if I consider the idea of Bana Elohim, that in this, if I understand the instructions and if I catch myself, then I become restored, and I become restored and established. I become Bana HaElohim. I become the restored and established in Elohim. Okay? And if I say restored and established in Elohim, then Elohim means the authority of El, the authority of Yahuwah. Then when I catch myself and I pay attention to the Torah because it's in my mind and it's in my spirit, even though the body is telling me, hey, it's nudging me to not believe a situation when I should be believing a situation, but I push that away and I understand where I'm at, then I become restored and established according to the authority of Yahuwah Elohim. Okay? And this is what it says in James, and then we'll finally get into the lesson. Just bear with me, because all this stuff is so important. But James, in chapter 1, verse 19, he starts, whereby, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man works not the righteousness of Elohim. Well, where does the wrath of man come from? Where does anger or depression or anxiety or all this come from? It's from our fleshly side, the part that we just talked about. The carnal side that leads us to not think about what we're going to say or not think about what we're going to do before we do it. We have an instruction that tells us, hey, if you believe, more than if you believe that Yahweh Elohim exists, if you are aware that there is a life force present with you that will help you to overcome whatever it is that's got you freaked out, wigged out, and stressed out, then you are Banach Elohim. You are restored and established because of the authority of Elohim in your life. Okay? Therefore I lay apart the filthiness and the topicalness of evil and receive with humility the engrafted word which is able to save your soul. I sound like a Baptist preacher. Save your souls. What does that mean? If we consider the idea of nefesh more than the idea of ruach. Now, ruach is the spiritual part of us, the part of us that allows us to interact and make choices. The soul is that part of us that is deep down. It's that tablet in which we write down what we've done with our life. It's that part of us that gets reviewed. At the end, it gets put into it. We die and everything on the disk drive is downloaded to the thumb drive, and Elohim puts it in his test computer to see what the disk is. And either it's good stuff with maybe a few flaws that, you ran a scan disk and it's done. You still run scan disks. I don't know. I have to go to my grandchildren to get help with my computer. Or it's so full of viruses that Elohim pulls it out and tosses it in file 13, because I'm not going to put a thumb drive that's full of garbage into a brand new supercomputer that's going to take me into Eden. So if we understand this, then it's the word itself and how we respond to that word that's able to deliver, restore, bring redemption to that part of us that we're writing down the story of our life. Okay? Be doers of the word, not just hearers only, deceiving your own self. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man, now listen to this, beholding his natural face in a glass, in a mirror, in a bronze laver. Okay? For he doesn't see himself. He goes his way, and straightway he forgets what kind of person he is. I have to be aware of what I bring to the table in a relationship with my wife, with my friends. How much more should I be aware of what I bring to the table in a relationship with my Elohim? I have to be willing to look at that bronze basin before I wash myself, so I know exactly what part of me needs the most scrubbing. We'll be honest with ourselves. We need to dive into it and take a full bath. That's what the mikveh is for, so fortunately we have that. But whoever looks into the perfect Torah of liberty and continues in it, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word, this person shall be blessed in his deed. But if anyone among you seems to be religious and doesn't bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, that religion is in vain. So let's throw away the idea of, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a Muslim, or a Hindu, or a Buddhist. Okay? Religion as a word means a system of belief. Has nothing to do with deities or Bibles or whatever. A system of belief. If I know where my system of belief is, I live according to that system of belief. And if my system of belief just happens to be a corrupted system of belief, then I live according to that corrupted system of belief. This is why it's so important that we look in the basin. Not look in the basement, look in the basin. Okay? Look in the basement too. But with all that, it brings us back to the importance of why Yahusha said that the Shema is the most important commandment. The Shema is a statement. But again, if we're reciting the Shema, especially now, especially during this time of the Omer, I'm looking to perceive, discern, and understand where I am in my relationship with my Elohim. Do I yield to his authority, or do I yield to Yaakov? Do I yield to things that I supplant, that pushes that authority aside? Am I aware that my Elohim is present in every aspect of my life, at every moment of my life? And am I in agreement with his word, and thus in unity with my Elohim? That within him I live and move and have my existence. All of this culminates, finally, into the Torah portion. Everybody's saying, yay, he finally got to the paper. Okay. So we have Parsha Bahar. that starts off, Vaidabar Yahuwah el Moshe Bechar Sinai le'amar. Everybody got that, right? Okay. And Yahuwah spoke to Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, most of your Bibles is going to say he spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. But we'll notice that it says Behar, okay? Meaning in Mount, not on Mount. And we're going to look at the importance of this. We're going to look at Vayikra 25, 1 through 7. We start with verse 1 that we just read. And Yahuwah spoke to Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, so it starts off with Vaidabar, meaning and spoke, because Dabar means to speak. But specifically, Dabar means proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises. Dabar is a word that holds the substance of what's going to be delivered. Okay? Dabar is not the physical action of speaking. It's what's there to speak. Okay? So these are spoken by Yahuwah, whose name means existence and everything at every time. So let's consider this a very important idea. The proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. So, we all think to ourselves, I already know this. Okay? But just like saying I believe that Yahuwah Elohim exists, saying that I know that his proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises and warnings exist with me, there's a difference between saying I believe that Yahuwah Elohim exists and saying I am aware that Yahuwah my Elohim is present. And I'm aware that he's aware of me. Because one is kind of a superficial thing. The other one becomes a relational thing. So we have to get away from that defensive thought and actually be asking, do I realize this? Do I realize that the proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in my existence? So this Torah always comes up during the Omer count, and it's truly a valid question if we're to take the time to sit down and truly ponder this question. I believe that we'd be shocked that we oftentimes don't realize this. Just like oftentimes we don't realize that Yahuwah our Elohim is present in our lives. So busy with our day-to-day stuff that I do something. I transgress because I'm not aware that Elohim is present, and I'm not aware that Elohim is present, or is aware that I'm present, and I'm not aware that his proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises are always present in my existence. The Torah is valid whether I'm thinking about it or whether I'm not thinking about it. So this time of reflection in the Omer count kind of gives us an opportunity to really look back and step back and say, where am I in this relationship and how dedicated am I to this relationship? Okay? So the word for to in the verse is el, but it also means towards or against. And it's towards or against Moshe, that as a name means to draw out. So before we formulate an idea, consider the word bahar, meaning in Mount, not on Mount. Okay? This word is telling us that we are in Mount Sinai and not on Mount Sinai. And this becomes a very important concept if we understand the meaning of Sinai. And I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll just go back to reading. Sinai as a word means thorny. How are we working the ground according to what Elohim told Adam? Amongst the thorns and thistles. We bear fruit amongst the thorns and thistles. Okay? The root of this word is har, that means hill or a mountain. And it gives us a topical idea of why inside the mount. The Proto-Hebrew of har, if we look at it, and you have it in your notes, is Hey and Resh, but Hey in Paleo-Hebrew is a little man holding his hands up saying, hey, I'm over here, pay attention. Okay? And then the Resh is actually the head of a person, saying that this is the head of the tribe, the chief, the person that has authority. So when we look at that, it means paying attention to something greater than we are that has authority. And this is something to consider, but why use the letter bait that means in? We learned that Sinai meant thorns and thistles. Considering this, we have to first look at what Yahuwah Elohim told the Adam after the transgression regarding the soil. And actually, it wasn't after the transgression. It was after the sin, because Adam had not bothered to repent. So Elohim tells him this: "Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field." So have you ever wondered why the instruction of Yahuwah Elohim was given at a place called thorns and thistles? Now think about that. The Torah is given at a place called thorns and thistles. Do we have thorns and thistles that surround the instruction of Elohim every single day in our lives? Yeah. It's called the physical aspect of our lives, right? So before going any further, ask yourself this: am I working around or in any thorns? Am I working around or in any thorns? That's a great question to ponder over the next, well, we've got a week out of the way. So the Feast of Weeks, 6 weeks to go. Before you answer this, consider what your first response was to the statement. The proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. Was your response, "I already know this," or was your response, "I realize this"? Okay? It's a difference. I can know something but not take any action. But when I realize something, then I need to figure out what I need to do in order to move forward to correct it or whatever. Where are you? So let's formulate a single idea out of that verse. The proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. We must be able to draw them out while being in the thorns. We must be able to pay attention to something greater than we are that has authority over us. Okay, this is where we have that thing that Paul's talking about. I have sin, transgression within me, the physical part of me, but the Torah of Elohim is in my mind. Okay? He also says that the Torah is spiritual. Okay? The Torah, the instruction of Yahuwah Elohim, is something that should guide my life to overcome that emotional roller coaster that we run every day of our lives. Okay? We don't believe because we allow the physical aspect of our lives to overrun the spiritual reality of our lives. Okay? Remember, we're spiritual beings in what a pastor friend of mine calls an earth suit. Okay? All right. So we consider the source of this authority in the last word of this verse, that is le'emor, that means saying. Le'emor now is the action word. It's going to deliver, debar. Okay, so Hebrew grammar, debar is the content, emor is the execution of that content. Okay, it means saying, but we learn that this word also means more than just to say. It means to speak from one's heart. And again, we consider that the last letter of the Torah is Lamed, the first letter is Beit. Together they spell Leb, that means heart. So when Yahuwah speaks from his heart, he speaks from his Torah. It is, as we've just learned, our own objections that get in the way. We make statements. I already know this, when I should be asking, do I realize this? It's for this very reason that we have to grasp that the Torah portion is going to teach us what it's going to teach us in the following Sitra. We have the Torah. The instruction of Elohim is given to us. But we reside amongst the thorns and thistles so much that we don't always glean what we should glean from it. Okay? Verse 2. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah. So, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, although there's like a whole paragraph dedicated to it, so maybe I didn't exactly tell the truth. The children of Israel, we've learned, represents those who have established that Elohim is greater than they are. Okay? The children of Israel, Bana Yisrael, we say those who are restored and established by the authority of Elohim, as opposed to the children of Jacob, those who are restored and established by something they've supplanted in their life. Okay? When we read about the land, the earth is a representation of our lives. What we plant is what our lives yield. This verse says that we are to observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah when we come into the land that Yahuwah our Elohim gives us. Okay. So we can consider now that it is Yahuwah our Elohim who has given us our lives. Okay? Yahusha had this wonderful thing about the servants that got a whole bunch of talents, and one got a whole whopping 1 talent. And all the other ones invested it and produced something, but the one decided that since he only had 1, he'd go ahead and bury it. And he didn't do anything with what Elohim had given him. The talents are the life that we have. We can choose to invest in that life and bring forth fruit for the Master. Or we can choose to do absolutely nothing with what Elohim has given us. And basically, we end up with a flash drive that's totally devoid of anything good. Okay? Shabbat means to rest, to put away work and or to desist from exertion. Stop digging in the thorns to find fruit. This Shabbat is to be observed from the word veshavta, whose root is Shabbat. We are being told not once, but twice to rest, to put away work and to desist from exertion. So how many witnesses does it take to make a conviction? We're being told twice to observe the Sabbath. So when we're told twice, we have to consider that from the mouths of 2 witnesses, something is true. Okay? So we must do this. This is to be done in the direction of Yahuwah. It says, Le Yahuwah. We've learned that the Lamed means to learn and to receive guidance. We can also consider that we are to rest, to put away work, and or to desist from exertion in order to learn from and be led by Yahuwah. Why do we take the time to stop what we're doing and seek the instruction of Elohim? We only have to do that for 1 24-hour period a week, right? Because there's only 1 Shabbat, right? Moses, when he recites the Shema, also gives us the Ve'ahavta, that tells us you'll love Yahuwah your Elohim with all your heart, your mind, your heart, your soul, and your strength. And you'll talk about it, or you'll talk about it when you get up, and you'll talk about it when you lay down, and you'll talk about it along the way. So if I am observing this period of instruction with my Elohim, and my desire to have this relationship with my Elohim, then how many times do I have to desist, stop, from tearing around in the thorns in order to listen to my Elohim? Okay? So, let's back up a little bit. So, it says, we are to rest, to put away work, and to desist from exertion in order to learn from and be led by Yahuwah. In this verse, we are able to recognize the proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises of Yahuwah are always present in our existence. We have to be able to draw them out while we are in the thorns. We must be able to pay attention to something greater than we are that has authority over us. So, why do I stop? I stop to consider those proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises, and also, Dabar means warnings that come from Elohim. This is how I keep that physical person in subjection and allow the spiritual aspect of me to bubble up and move forward in my life. So if we understand this, then we can move on to the next verse. For continuity purposes, it's on the following page. I don't know why I put that. I figured everybody just figured that out if there wasn't anything else to say, right? It says in verse 3, 6 years shall you sow your field, and 6 years shall you prune your vineyard and gather in the produce of it. So before we look at the verse itself, let's consider the idea of your. This word is possessive. It's talked about in this verse, belongs to you, and what you do with it depends on you. This is your field. Your life is your field. What you do with your life is up to you to do with your life. This is why we are B'Tselem. We are in the image and likeness of Elohim. We have the ability to choose. Okay? The word is possessive. We've already talked this. With this in mind,